Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Tech Sharmit podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce a very special guest, Barret Blake, who is joining us all the way from United States. Barrett is a highly accomplished Azure Solution Architect with over 20 years of experience in professional development and 10 years of experience in technology leadership. As a Microsoft MVP, Barrett has become a trusted expert in designing scalable, secure, and user friendly cloud based solutions, particularly for clients in highly regulated industries like healthcare and finance. Beyond his technical expertise, he is also an active speaker, blogger, and a mentor who is deeply committed to sharing his knowledge and inspiring the next generation of developers. So, today in this episode, we will explore Barrett's journey, his insight into cloud architecture. But before we dive in, I would like to thank Barrett for joining us today in this episode. And now I request you, Barrett, to please initiate the discussion by telling us something about yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on. So yeah, like you said, I've been in tech professionally for about 20 years now. And I'm not somebody who is always in that career field. I'm somebody who changed careers in my 30s. I started off, I went to college, didn't really work for me the first time around. So I dropped out and did a few, manufacturing and retail jobs for about 10 years before I decided it was time to go back to school and get my degree and move into tech from there. So it was uh, pretty tough to make that kind of mid-career change, and something that has inspired me to try to help and guide others who have faced similar decisions in their lives and trying to change paths midstream, so to speak.
Okay. So let's take into the same direction. Like we would love to know more about your journey in the initial days because you have had an impressive career spanning nearly 20 years in professional development and 10 years in technology leadership. So what pivotal mode or moments or decision that were there that shaped your journey to becoming an Azure solution architect?
Yeah, because as I think back through my career, I don't know that there's any one particular moment that really kind of shaped it. It's been the accumulation of a lot of little things along the way. I, as you start in development, my first job, I was the only .NET developer on the team. My manager didn't know anything about .NET. He basically said, "This is what the team you're going to be supporting needs." Handed me this book that said, Visual Basic .NET 1.1, and said, "Here, go to work." and, uh, so that was kind of how I started, and it was a tough start, not having anybody around me that could support me and try to figure out things. And this was in the fairly early days of the internet. There wasn't a whole lot of resources out there for people to reach. So I had to do a lot of self-learning, a lot of scouring this little corner and that little corner. This was in the days before Stack Exchange and things like that. So um, it was a tough start, but it drove me to be creative and to try to find the best solution to figure out what it was that the team that I was supporting needed for the application that we were working on. Um, so that was kind of like the first pivotal moment, is I think, or accumulation of things. And just over the years, as I've moved from position to position and company to company, it's been an accumulation of a lot of little things. I had managers who were very supportive and very helpful in driving me along that path. And and I had other situations where there wasn't a whole lot of support, and I had to be a self-starter. But I found over the years that I really enjoyed the design part of it, the creativity part of it, being able to figure out what the best solution, or at least a great solution, was, because you don't always come up with the best solution. But
Right.
um, and I found that the more as I went through, yeah, as a developer, you get to be creative in that one little piece that you're working on at a time. But as I got more into it and realized that the people who make the high level decisions, who are creating the application from the top down, the architects, the managers, that was really what I wanted to do, because I wanted to be more involved in the overall design of things, and maybe less involved in the day-to-day hands-on minutia of a particular task. So that was probably the biggest driving force for me moving, towards the leadership roles, towards the architecture
Yeah,
roles, was being able to design and create from that super high level as opposed to the really detail oriented level at the bottom. Um, or not at the bottom because developers aren't at the bottom, but at the micro level, I guess, if you want to look at it that way.
correct. Okay, so Barrett, like with your so far experience or with your so far journey, we can easily see that you have worked with diverse clients, right? So whenever there is a moment for designing a cloud-based solution for different kind of clients, so how do you balance scalability, security, and user friendliness? Because we all know that these are the three factors that impact a lot the project. So could you please share one example, like how you are managing all these kind of factors?
Yeah, and like you say, I've had the whole gamut of things. I've worked from small, tiny companies working into the education space, all the way up to the major corporations working in finance, insurance,
Right.
government, whatever it might be. And it's a really difficult challenge to come up with that balance because you have to take into account, especially for things like regulations. You got every client, every company that you work for has a different set of rules that you have to follow.
Hmm.
And for me, I'm not great at UI UX design kind of stuff.
Okay.
User interfaces are definitely not my thing. So that's why I'm glad I've always been surrounded by great designers who could handle that part of things for me. Um, but yeah, you're right. Finding that balance between how much do we have to focus on security? How much do we have to focus on efficiency? How much do we have to focus on architecture? Making all those pieces fit together is the ongoing constant challenge. And um, especially things like security, because you get into some clients where they want to roll their own security, and that's always a bad idea. You never want to be rolling your own security. You want to implement plug and play solutions wherever possible, and maybe kind of tweak it a little bit to fit your needs at a particular client. But um, so you always have to, from the very ground up, you have to consider all those pieces, all those disparate sections of the architecture of the application. But for the most part, most of the time, I'll start with like the data layer. What does the data
Okay.
look like? How does all this data that we need to implement and integrate into this application, how does it fit together?
Hmm.
What's the size and the scale of that data? What are the various pieces of it? How much of it is confidential and secure type information? How much of it should be exposed to the users? How much of it only exists in the background to support the rest of the application? All those
Hmm.
various pieces. And once you figure out the data, then you can start looking at the data access layer. Okay, I've got these various pieces of data coming from these different systems. So I figure out, what do we host in the application? What do we access via, third-party APIs or APIs in other systems in the client?
Hmm.
Um, and then once you kind of work through the data layer, then you can start looking at, like your API interface. How's your own application going to access that data? What business rules do you need to integrate into it? How do you apply it? As you're starting getting into those pieces, then you can start figuring out, okay, what technologies make sense to be a part of, should this be .NET? Should this be Go? Should this be, React on the front end, or, Blazor or, you know, Angular or whatever it might be. You can figure out all those little pieces as you're working through the various
Right.
implementations of that data. How is the user going to access that data? And as you kind of work through that piece by piece, then the whole thing kind of comes together. Obviously, as you go through that, security has to be one of the highest concerns as you're going through that.
Yes.
How do you protect that data? How do you protect the application itself? Whether it be networking, whether it be firewalls, your OAuth or how it is you're going to secure access to it. How do you set up the roles? What roles are you going to have, and how are they going to be able to access the various pieces of data that are all a part of that application? Um, One of the things that I've learned about relatively recently is that Microsoft has this excellent review tool that they call the Azure Well Architected Review.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically a set of questions that you walk through and say, okay, have you considered this? Have you considered this? How are you implementing this? And it covers the whole gamut of things from architecture to security to how your team works together. You know, what kind of policies do you have in place for
Right.
development? What kind of tools are you using for development? And you can actually go out on the Microsoft Learn site and you can find this Azure Well Architected Review piece, and it takes you about an hour to walk through all the questions, depending on the size of the application.
Mm-hmm.
But it gives you a lot of pieces to think about that perhaps you might not have considered, you know, when you were walking through the architecture. And you can do it at any point in the application. You can do it midstream. You can do it after the application's done. You can do it before you start the application architecture. Um, so I've found recently that's been a very helpful tool to help you consider some of those questions, especially that you weren't thinking about when you started the whole process.
Okay. All right. And we all know that yes, Azure is changing the scenarios nowadays. Like everyone is moving to Azure, migrating to Azure, right? But still, there are some clients that have some misconception and they believe in some myths that yes, it's not right time for the migration to Azure. So how do you address those kind of misconception, especially for those clients who really wanted to move to Azure system, but they believe in some kind of myths. So how you address those things?
Yeah, for most of those people, there's three kind of positions or three things that are keeping them from making that migration.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is they just are not ready to make that move. They are
Okay.
content with having their on-prem servers. They're content with having, you know, it's basically inertia that they are happy with where they're at. They don't see a reason to move. So that I think is one of the biggest concerns that most of those people who haven't made that move to the cloud still have.
Okay.
It's just, you know, we've invested in these servers, we've invested in this data center, we've invested in these teams to support it. Why should we make that move? Um, so that I think is the first obstacle that you kind of have to work through, and you have to talk to them. Well, okay, maybe we'll start with a hybrid approach,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one of the most helpful things to say. Okay, let's take one application, let's move that to the cloud. You can kind of watch that over time. You can kind of see the benefits of it. You can see the advantages of not hosting it yourself. So
Okay.
that's the first kind of approach is kind of suggesting that hybrid, you know, take a little piece of it, and you can connect that to your on-prem. You can, you know, say we'll say, well, you know, it connects to other systems in our app, in our on-prem system, our on-prem data center, and you know that's fine. You can create that secure connection between the cloud and your on-prem, and you can make
Yeah.
that work. So that's not, you know, that's not a huge obstacle to overcome. Is demonstrating that to them, showing them that it can be secure, showing them that it works.
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing that I think that kind of hinders a lot of people is they think it's going to be more expensive. They say, "Oh well,
Yeah.
you're paying by usage, and how can you plan for that?" Well, yeah, it can be difficult to plan for that usage. You don't always know how much an application is going to use, but if you kind of compare those costs to an on-prem data center, you've got those fixed costs with your on-prem. You've got you know that your server costs the same to run no matter what. You know, you've got that cost, you got the license cost, you got the daily usage of it, whatever it might be. Whereas, you know, when you go to the cloud and you're doing it by usage, you can scale that up and down. You can say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, when it's not being used very much, you scale your resources way down, you barely use anything. And then when, you know, the usage gets heavy, whether it's, you know, a spike or whether it's a, you know, a scaling up, a growth of the application, you can address those costs and you know you can scale your application with it so you're only paying for what you use. And you know, yeah, if your application is poorly designed, um, it can cost you, it can run away, it can, you know,
Yeah.
if you're not being efficient in that. So you have to consider that as part of the application design. You know, is the application one that you can put into the cloud and make it work right? So there's the cost factor. And the other, I think, concern that most of them have is security. They think, well, the cloud, you know, it's somebody else's data center, it's somebody else's servers, so it's not secure.
Yeah.
It's not something that I want to be involved in. But you know, you have to approach that the other way. Say, you know, these vendors like, you know, Azure, like AWS, like Google, whatever it might be, they invest huge amounts of money in these dedicated security teams whose only job is security. You know, that's all they do 24/7, 365. They protect those data centers from hackers. They protect those data centers and the systems on there from physical incursion, from these data center buildings. They're some of the most secure buildings on the planet. So physical security is not an issue.
Right.
Um, and like I say, they have these dedicated teams for the digital security as well. So a lot of those things. So you don't have to worry nearly as much about firewalls. You don't have to worry about server patching. You don't have to worry about all those things that you have to handle as part of your on-prem system if you're doing it right. So so it's actually far more secure to be hosting your application in the cloud in most cases. Yeah, you can still screw that up by opening up your ports, by opening up your application, by making sure your application is poorly designed. So you can still screw up that security, but for the most part, it is generally, if you're following basic, security principles, it's a far more secure platform to host it in these cloud environments than it is to host it in your on-prem data centers. So those are kind of the three things I think that most people have to learn to overcome as part of that process in moving from an on-prem to a cloud solution.
Okay. So the way you have throw light on these kind of misconception, I'm pretty much sure now client have those who are watching this podcast, they have some clarity. Like, yes, these are some might be a kind of myth that they are thinking that might affect their project, but no, the fact is different. Like if we take a one step, then for sure it would be beneficial for us if we are moving to Azure services. All right.
Yeah, yeah. So like I say, start them small. Start with the one little piece, one little application. Say, okay, let's try this one as an experiment. Let's
Correct.
see how it goes, and learn from that and move forward.
Okay. All right. So Barrett, like we all know that you have contributed a lot throughout your journey as an tech expert, but I also know like in your initial days you also spent some time or around 10 or more than 10 months as a part-time instructor at Tech Elevator for teaching the web development fundamentals. So what inspired you to teach, and what do you enjoy most about mentoring the aspiring developers?
One of the biggest things for me is that, this career has been really good to me. It's been a huge benefit and a blessing in my life, and I feel like it's a responsibility that I have to contribute back as much as I can
Correct.
to the community to ensure that other people can get the benefit out of as well. Whether it be speaking at conferences, speaking at user groups, teaching and mentoring. Um, excuse me. Uh, so I feel like I have a responsibility to give back to something that has been so great to me. So I really enjoy working with people who are just getting started or who want to um, move into the tech field. And yeah, right now it's not real easy. It's not a great time to be moving into tech. But um, one of the things that I enjoyed most about being able to teach, part time on the side was seeing the growth and the development of those people who were coming from these different fields. Because the people that I were teaching, they were like me. They were career changers. They were people who were nurses, who were teachers, who
Yeah.
were police officers, who were in all these other different career fields and had gotten fed up with those jobs and wanted something better for themselves. So they would come into this program that Tech Elevator was running. It was a remote teaching program, so I could do it from home in the evenings and the weekends. Um, and I would, working with them and helping them, mentoring them, guiding them, helping the light or seeing the light dawn in their eyes when they get a concept, whether it be classes or uh, you know just loops or whatever it might be. These principles that I've been understanding for 15, 20, 30 years, whatever it might be, and seeing the light dawn in their eyes where, oh yeah, that's how that works. This is why I do this. This is why I do that. And seeing that growth and seeing them start on their journey into the tech field was just a very rewarding experience for me. And unfortunately, the program they got decided to get rid of the part-time instructors, so I was no longer there. And I would love to be able to find that kind of opportunity again, where I can teach part-time on the weekends and the evenings to help as I say, to give back to the community. I would love do that again if the right opportunity came along. So, and even beyond that, I still have people that I work with, whether it be at work or on the side, who are early in their careers, and I try to give them feedback and guidance and mentoring where I can, especially people who are looking to move into the career field. Um, those are the opportunities that I try to take advantage of the most to be kind of a mentor and a teacher when I can.
Okay. All right. Fine. So, it at this moment, like if someone asks you to give one piece of advice to all those students and junior developers who wanted to specialize in cloud technologies or to becoming a solution architect, so what one piece of advice would you like to share there?
Well, I mean, there's a couple things really, as I was kind of thinking about
Hmm.
that. The first one is the soft skills are more important than the technology
Right.
skills. The ability to communicate. As the longer I've been in this career field, the more that I have noticed that we as a community, as a culture of developers, we're really bad at communicating. We're really bad at explaining concepts. We're really bad at being able to translate the technical into non-technical terms for the people that we're working with, whether it be clients or the business unit or whatever
Right.
it might be. We're bad at that. And it's something where we as a whole, as a developer culture, need to work on fixing and communicating better. So focus a lot on those communication skills and being able to translate that technical into non-technical terms. Another thing that I would say is focus on the fundamentals. Just about every programming language works the same way. The difference is the syntax really. There's
Syntaxes.
really
Yeah.
not much other difference. So if you focus on the fundamentals on why something works the way it does on that kind of thing, then you can translate that into any programming language really without too much effort at all. Uh, Another thing, is it is tough right now, especially for entry level people. It's really tough to find a job with constant rounds of layoffs. So don't be discouraged. Keep at it. You'll get there eventually.
Mhm.
Then the last thing, specifically as far as architecture goes, as far as being a solutions architect, so, what you do as an architect from day to day really depends on where you're working at. I was talking to somebody, a couple weeks ago, and he was telling me about what it was that he does as an architect at his job, and he's doing things like creating deployment pipelines. He's working on infrastructure, with setting up infrastructure and things like that, and
Mhm.
that's what he's doing most of the time, day to day. And I'm sitting here thinking, I don't do any of that stuff at my workplace. We have dedicated DevOps engineers, we have dedicated infrastructure engineers who handle that kind of thing. What I do as an architect is things like proof of concepts, like figuring out requirements, figuring out what the solution is going to be. I don't do a whole lot of the hands-on day-to-day stuff. I still do a lot of hands-on development, probably 30-40% of my time, but um, all these things that he was talking to me about that he does as an architect every single day are completely different. So it really depends on where you're working as to what that role as an architect is and what it is that they do. So yeah, you have to know how to do all those things, and it's a part of the job. But like anything in tech, the titles are kind of nebulous, and the things that you be doing at a specific company really vary from place to place. So you kind of have to get
Right.
used to that kind of way of working.
Okay. Fine. So, Barrett, we can see that you have trained so many IT folks in order to help them to pursue their career in a easy way or in a more proficient way. But here at this moment, I wanted to know like who are those key people who have helped you, inspired you, or trained you in your journey. Like maybe they could be your mentors, your friends, family member, anyone. So, who are those key people?
Yeah, there have been so many people over the years who have inspired me and who have been a guide to me. I like everybody. I've had great managers. I've had bad managers. I had one particular manager when I was working at an insurance company where she didn't put up with crap from anybody. She would stand up for her team. She would stick up for us and back us up no matter what. And that was one of the biggest learning experiences that I had as far as leadership and being an influence to those around you is that you got to have your people's backs. You got to be able to support them. You just can't throw them aside when they make a mistake. You have to help them learn from it, and you have to be able to defend them against the people that are higher up in the hierarchy, or from the business side or whoever it is that might be kind of getting on your people. So that those kinds of people who were that kind of support and strength. I had another when I was working at Citibank, my manager there, a couple levels up. There was an incident that I was responsible for where a production application was brought down. It's an application that moves millions of dollars overnight as part of the system that we were working with. And, I screwed something up and it wasn't working. And, we were facing the possibility of some major penalties from the various clients that we were working with, financial penalties. And we, instead of throwing blame at me and instead of, you know, tossing me aside or under the bus, throwing me under the bus, as the saying goes. Instead, we buckled down. We all got to work as a team, and we got it fixed and resolved in time to avoid all those penalties that might have come about. So, um, those kinds of inspiring leadership, as far as those are the people that influenced me on one side, and like I said, there've been, as far as getting involved in the community itself, there've been some great people, especially here in the Ohio area of the United States. People like Jeff Blankenberg and Sudoku and Matt Eland and Guy Royce. Those are some of the people who have been especially inspiring to me over the years as far as getting involved in the community. And but there have been so many others. I just can't name everybody.
Right.
But by far, the two biggest examples to me and biggest supports to me were my mom and my dad, of course. And,
For sure.
my mom taught me to be realistic and practical in my approach to things. That the world is not going to, uh, the world's not always going to be there for you. So you always have to figure out how to support yourself and defend yourself. And then my dad taught me the value of service. My dad constantly, whether it be, through work or community or church or scouts or whatever it was that he was involved in, he was constantly serving other people, constantly helping other people. And he never once complained about it. He never once said anything bad about anybody, really. He was such an amazing and inspiring person to me, as far as that goes, and being involved in the community. And it was one of the things that really influenced me when I decided, hey, this community's been great to me. I need to start giving back. And it
Mhm.
was his influence in me growing up that kind of motivated that and drove that in me. So
Okay. All right. So, Barrett, although we have many things that we can discuss here in this podcast, but just because of the limitation of time, I would like to ask my last question. And this
sure.
is regarding the life lesson because you have learned and you have shared a lot throughout your journey. So, what do you think, as a lifelong learner, what are some of the most impactful lessons you have learned in your career?
Um, there are a couple things. One I kind of hinted at or touched on earlier is communication skills.
Communication.
Those are key. Those are critical to this career field, is being able to communicate. Those who communicate well are going to go much further in this career field than those who don't. Um,
Mhm.
the other one's problem solving skills. Like I say, don't focus so much on the tech, focus on your ability to solve the problems, because most everything you do as a developer, as an architect, even as a leader, is solving some kind of problem. Whether it be a business problem, whether it be a crisis, whatever it is, there's always some problem to solve. And so that has to be a key skill that you learn as well, is problem solving. Um, because part of the problems that you deal with throughout your career field are coworkers. You get some great coworkers, but you get some problem ones as well, and you have to learn how to deal with them. So by developing those communication skills, by developing those problem solving skills, not only helps you with dealing with the tech problems, but it helps dealing with the social problems as well that you're going to run into throughout your career field. So those two things, communication and problem solving, I think those are the biggest lessons to learn and the biggest things to focus on. And the rest will come along as it needs to.
All right. So thank you so much, Barrett, for taking out the time and for joining us in this episode and for sharing your expertise with everyone. It was really very nice talking with you, and I hope you also enjoyed the discussion. So thank you
It was
once
very
again.
great. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.